Our story begins in a huge fitness center located in Gangnam, Seoul, South Korea. Choi Kang-yu happily greeted the many fans tuning into his YouTube livestream. As requested, he would be doing a mukbang of some honey chicken and promotional beer that have been trending lately. He quickly started digging in. It was actually pretty delicious. Just a look at his muscles is enough to tell someone that he is obsessed with working out. But he wasn't always a gym rat. He got into it after suffering a serious injury that would have made walking very difficult if he didn't work on his physique. He was hurt during a special forces mission. He underwent physical therapy and visited a chiropractor. From there, he got into yoga, Pilates, and pretty much anything that was good for his health. That includes studying nutrition to improve his diet. These days, he is a special rehab trainer that emphasizes the importance of a strong foundation and trusting the process. He has a formal education in physical therapy and several certifications. But despite being the best trainer in the country, he's resorted to streaming a mukbang. This is because the pandemic ruined everything. The whole situation was really rough on his gyms. He turned to content creation as a way to help pay the bills. But it is still far from enough to support his 5 gym locations. Forcing a smile, Kang told his viewers to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Because of course, that's what you do when you enjoy a video. Once the stream ended, Kang was already fretting over the implications of his meal. It was a lot of calories. He wanted to work out immediately, but it would be rough on his body on account of the alcohol intake. Kang thought about his doctor's insistence that he rest. According to the diagnosis, he is losing his hair due to stress. This hit him pretty hard. Despite the attention placed on his health, Kang's body is apparently breaking down due to overwhelming stress. His doctor told him to cut back on work. Otherwise, he will definitely go bald. Just the thought of it was enough to fill the gym rat with despair. He imagined being made fun of and never having a girlfriend again. The doctor would prescribe some medicine, but rest was absolutely necessary. But that's a bit of a tall order right now. Work and exercise are the only things he really does. Then, he had a realization and pulled out his phone. It's been a while, but he used to love reading martial arts novels when he was younger. Kang grew up poor and was raised by his grandparents. He'd borrow books from the local bookstore. These were really fond memories for him. Just then, he recognized a certain author, one that wrote 2 of his favorites, Absolute Demon's Return and Unorthodox Factions Tyranny. He noticed a new series from the same writer, Shaolin Monk Chronicles. The main character Mu Jin just entered the Shaolin Temple and will pave a new path forward as a martial artist. Kang decided to give it a try, and it didn't take long for him to get hooked. The experience was relaxing. He couldn't remember how long it's been since he really enjoyed himself like this. It almost felt like being a kid again. Kang collapsed. He felt really tired all of a sudden. Soon, his phone began to emit a radiant glow. A voice called out to Mu Jin, urging him to wake up. Kang's eyes snapped open at the mention of them needing to go to morning exercise. The former soldier prepared himself for a workout as if he'd been programmed. But what he saw in front of him was totally unexpected. A shaved head? A gi? A small monk was flailing his arms about them being tardy and left behind by the others. Kang wanted to know who the hell this kid is, how he got into his house, and who shaved his head. The monk questioned the fact that he was being called a kid by someone younger and smaller than him. Kang couldn't believe his ears. He is 5'9", has 8 to 10% body fat, and weighs 198 pounds. He put a hand on the kid's shoulder and wondered if something's wrong with the boy's eyes. He really questioned how the little rascal was able to sneak into his house. But upon closer inspection, he was finally able to notice the truth. He investigated his own body and started freaking out. He wanted to know what was up with his hair and what he was doing in such an old-looking home. Then he realized that the other boy called him Mu Jin. That is the name of the protagonist from the novel he was reading. He started to panic about his situation and the loss of his precious muscles. But his rationality managed to catch up. He figured that this was all just a dream, much to the other boy's confusion. He decided to follow along and go with the other kid. They would need to hurry. Since this is all just a dream, Kang decided to enjoy the situation as Mu Jin. A furious elder reprimanded them for being late to the first schedule of the day and planned to teach them a lesson. He commanded them to take their places. Mu Jin marveled at the dream's realism. Their training would begin with the horse stance, another name for squats. Mu Jin observed the other disciples around him. They were all straining and clearly having trouble. He was stunned. Their form was terrible. They would totally ruin their knees if they continued doing it like that. During his recovery training, Kang started doing proper exercise. He knows firsthand how important lower body and core exercises really are. He's seen plenty of trainers with poor methods that only focus on the upper body. At just a glance, he could tell that their legs were spread too far apart and that they should straighten their backs and lean forward naturally. Their instructor bellowed that the lower body is the very foundation of martial arts. Without the balance it provides, they wouldn't be able to properly make use of their strength for punching or staff techniques. Mu Jin found the statements to be ridiculous since none of them have proper posture. Even if this is just a dream, he is not the kind of guy to let something like this slide. He blurted out that none of them know the first thing about proper exercise. The instructor, his peers, and all the other disciples were in disbelief. The kid he came with wondered what was up with him. Mu Jin was yelled at for making a ruckus in the middle of training. The other seniors assumed the kid was making up excuses to avoid training and demanded that he get to work. Mu Jin could sense a strange energy from their shouts. But he refused to relent because he knows he's right. This was nothing compared to dealing with gym members that expected immediate results thanks to social media. The instructor reminded Mu Jin of his position as a Shaolin disciple. Was he saying that Shaolin training is wrong? Mu Jin decided to play along with the realistic dream and speak like a martial artist. He insisted that training like this would damage their knees and cause them great suffering in the future. The man chalked that up to being an excuse made by the weak. Mu Jin took a moment to process that. He was pretty sure that martial arts is meant to train the minds and bodies of the weak. Yet this guy is saying that it's something the weak can't learn. Seeing him struggle with the contradiction, another senior chimed in to say that they train in martial arts so they can improve themselves and achieve enlightenment. Mu Jin held his chin thoughtfully. Were they implying that Shaolin is a place where the weak can achieve enlightenment? The flustered man explained that they train their bodies harshly as a means of further honing their minds. He elaborated that the human mind is weak. By seeking comfort during hard times, evil thoughts have a chance to find their way in. They're training their minds in advance so they can endure such situations. Following that logic, Mu Jin assumed that training the mind must only be needed when a person is young. The man wasn't sure how to respond. If he was hearing things right, then it's okay to mess up your knees from a young age for the sake of training the mind. And once they're old and have a damaged body, they won't have to go through tough times. Does this mean that suffering a bit as a kid is enough to ensure enlightenment in the future? At this point, the seniors seem to be losing the crowd. To everyone's further surprise, Mu Jin pointed to an elder monk and wondered how much he must have gone through to still lack enlightenment at such an old age following their logic. That's when the senior realized that the kid he's talking to is insane. The first class disciple Hai Jung inhaled deeply. Then, he exerted a surge of power. Everyone was forced to clutch onto their ears. Mu Jin shuddered at the sensation. Disciple Jung approached while agreeing that martial arts is just a tool to reach enlightenment, but argued that their martial arts are different. Mu Jin questioned what makes it different. Jung expressed that their martial arts are used to rescue others, protecting them from evil and demons. Mu Jin asked him if they were training to mess up their knees as a way of protecting the masses. Jung observed him sternly. He concluded that Mu Jin is a bad apple that could be a bad influence on the others if left unchecked. But adults personally punishing a new monk would be wrong. So he decided to give the boy a chance to prove that their training methods truly are incorrect. Since their way is apparently wrong, he assumed that the boy must know the correct way to do things. In that case, he would need to win against those who have learned their methods. Mu Jin feared that the elder wanted to take him on in a fight. Instead, Mu Jin would be going up against someone who joined the temple at the same time as him. He called on a boy named Mu Gung. Mu Jin would be given a week to train himself using his own methods. Then, he would spar with Mu Gung. Mu Jin could tell that the other boy was clearly in a different weight class. The first disciple definitely didn't care about fairness as much as he lets on. The older monk assumed that Mu Jin would back down, but it was quite the contrary. He easily accepted the terms. There was no way he would lose to some kid. Mu Gung scowled at him. Jung clenched his jaw. He turned his back to the boy and accepted that he has chosen the hard path. Then, he told everyone to resume their training. The kid who woke him up tried to tell Mu Jin that there's no shame in apologizing, but Mu Yul was told to get in position before he could get a proper response. Mu Gung's expression was as hard as stone. The other boys were annoyed by the fact that Mu Jin put their instructors in a bad mood. Jung's irritation was even greater, but he accepted that Mu Jin would learn his lesson in 7 days. Soon, Mu Jin was breathing heavily while working up a sweat. He was performing several squats in rapid succession. At one point, a senior yelled at him for doing different exercises in the middle of training. But since Hai Jung allowed it, he wondered if the guy has more authority. Jung showed up and told the senior to leave Jin be. As he continued working out, Mu Jin couldn't help but smile. He smugly told his fellow students that their knees would be totally messed up at this rate. He continued to egg them on throughout their struggles. They just had to pretend that he wasn't there. Jung could only grind his teeth since he already gave his word. After training for 2 hours straight, it was finally time to eat. But despite Mu Jin's excitement, there was something he totally overlooked about his new lifestyle. He looked at his food in utter disbelief. Buddhist monks are vegetarians. While everyone else was grateful, Mu Jin was still coming to terms with the lack of protein. He scowled at the crappy meal. But then again, if this is all just a dream, why is he able to smell it? That being said, it does smell pretty good despite just being vegetables. But that was not enough to improve his mood. Mu Jin could not hold his frustration in anymore. He slammed his fists on the table and complained about child abuse. When they told him not to talk during the meal, he shouted back that they spent the entire morning training, only to be given vegetables. That is way too harsh. His seniors were really fed up with his disrespect. One of them decided to teach him a lesson. Mu Jin did not care. He needs protein. Just then, the door behind them opened up. The new figure began laughing. The seniors looked in his direction and jolted in surprise. It was Hallmaster Hyun Moon. The man greeted them all with a smile. He accepted that the young monk is just very hungry. Since it wasn't enough, he offered to give the kid a second helping. But Mu Jin responded that there was enough food. Seeing as this was just the grumbling of a hungry child, the Hallmaster decided to be kind and offer more of the side dish. Mu Jin started to ask if they had protein supplements, but thought better of it and requested chicken breast instead. Everyone in the room was outraged. Mu Yul asked his friend if there was really something wrong with his head. Mu Jin yelled that they need to add protein to their diets, but he soon began to speak hesitantly. He peered into the other boy's eyes. Then he considered how strange this entire experience has been. When he exercised, he was able to feel tired, and he can smell the food. Is all of this actually real? Regardless, he needed to handle the current situation. He is a young monk in a Shaolin temple. Mu Jin decided to apologize for behaving strangely due to his hunger. The Hallmaster was able to rationalize that the boy was just tired from training and misspoke. Even still, Mu Jin tried requesting some beans and mushrooms. The Hallmaster looked at him disbelievingly. Now he was sure that the boy is definitely crazy. Immediately after eating, the monks began studying scriptures. Mu Jin thought about how he'd make it back home. Since he's in the novel, maybe he'll be able to leave when the story is over. Looking at things like that, maybe this wasn't so bad. Since he's the main character, Mu Jin must have incredible potential, and the Shaolin Temple is the strongest in the Orthodox Alliance. Mu Jin accidentally spilled ink on his book and cried out in surprise. This caused everyone in the room to glare at him. Right now, his biggest issue is that nobody seems to like him very much. Whatever, that's just how it goes. By winning the spar, he would force them to acknowledge his methods. First disciple Jung heard what happened at breakfast and apologized to the hallmaster in Mu Jin's stead. The hallmaster wanted his opinion on the kid. Jung told him about the scheduled spar. The hallmaster praised him for his wisdom. He already knows that Mu Gung is the most competent new disciple that they have received. Hundreds of new disciples are taken in by the temple each year. Most drop out since they can't handle the harsh training. Some only manage to learn basic martial arts and join an outer sect. Only about 10% of them manage to remain in the main temple. This is why most first-class disciples or elders don't know the names of new monks. But Mu Gung is different. They are sure that he will be able to teach the troublemaking Mu Jin a lesson. A week later, two young monks approached each other. The time has finally come. They stared one another down, ready to fight. Yul asked Jin what he was up to. Mu Jin was doing something called stretching. Mu Yul didn't understand the word, so Jin changed it to martial arts terms as a tendon extension technique. Doing so ahead of exercise prepares a person's muscles and tendons as a means of avoiding bodily shock. Many postures and methods exist. The movement range of a person's joints and the flexibility of their muscles are increased. Since the other boy was so curious, Jin suggested that he give it a try. Yul tried it out. He was surprisingly good at it. Just then, everyone's attention was drawn by the mention of consecutive punches. Mu Gung was demonstrating his exceptional punches. While Yul's eyes shone with admiration, Jin dreaded the idea of being hit by one of them. He thought about how he'd managed to defeat such an opponent with only a week of training under his belt. But when the time finally came, he was totally prepared. Jung didn't expect the boy to actually show up. Maybe he wasn't making an excuse to get out of training after all. Although he wasn't listening to the instructors, Jung saw the boy messing with a tree and came to the conclusion that he was training in his own way. Jin explained to Yul that he was practicing a way to take Mu Gung down in an instant, but he didn't explain why a tree was involved. Jung was already assured of Gung's victory. Gung himself was pleased by the older monk's attention. Although he felt bad, Mu Gung planned to climb the ladder by making an example out of Mu Jin. Although, he was pretty confused by his opponent's strange movements and the sounds his body was making. Jin fixed his posture. Then he asked Jung if they can start immediately. The other monks glared at what they assumed to be a confident facade. They were both instructed to move forward. It was time to begin. Mu Gung intended to prove the result of his consecutive punches that he has been training for 3 months. Mu Jin rushed in like a wild beast the moment the match began. Gung was taken aback by the sudden dash. Jin wasted no time. Gung steadied himself. He retaliated with a wind-breaking fist. Jin ducked down. No one could believe what they were seeing. Jin grabbed hold of the other boy's leg as if to steal it. There was no way he could use modern martial arts on a kid. The techniques he learned as a member of the Special Forces could kill a person. So he'd have to go for something that even a child can endure. This was a tackle. Gung was slammed down. The bigger boy reached out to struggle, but Jin's arms wrapped around the limb like the jaws of a predator. In a single second, Mu Gung had been subdued and placed in an armbar. The surrounding seniors yelled at the bigger boy to escape from the strange move. Their peers were in utter disbelief, but Mu Gung's pained expression said it all. He had no idea what was going on, but was in terrible pain. The seniors began shouting unbacked and ineffective advice on how to get out of it. But although they're unfamiliar with the move, as martial artists that have trained for at least a decade, they could tell how painful it must be on Mu Gung's arm. Mu Jin called out to his struggling opponent. He told him to surrender since resisting would only lead to a broken arm. Their seniors continued to beckon for some sort of escape. Jin let the boy know that if he exerts any more strength, his arm will be dislocated. If something goes wrong, he could end up with permanent damage. Gung continued to endure, but Jin kept telling him to give it a rest. The crowd continued to shout his name. Mu Gung suddenly bellowed out a cry of pain. Mu Jin was taken aback. The senior monks were devastated. Mu Jin let go and tried to comfort the ailing child. The seniors turned to Jung. They weren't sure what to do. Jin tended to the other boy's shoulder. He scolded their seniors for making two kids fight each other, while Mu-gung wiped tears from his eyes. Either way, Mu-jin is the winner. The chain punch. It's one of the 8 extremities fists. It primarily uses the fist, elbow, and shoulder. The technique allows for the quick defeat of opponents within short range. It's known for being very powerful, and Mu-gung possesses the greatest mastery over it out of all the young monks. Even the second-class disciples were impressed, but this morning, his chain punch lost to a boy with strange techniques. Now, Mu-gung could only fight his own tears. He sobbed about the unfairness of the duel. Mu-jin charged at him immediately and didn't even use the chain punch. He shouted that he can win against anyone if it's a fair fight. Mu-jin just comforted the boy's wounded pride. Their seniors listened in. They decided that Mu-gung actually had a point. They figured that it was pretty much a given that Shaolin martial arts would be used when sparring in Shaolin. From their perspective, the rules had been broken. Mu-jin could not believe their ridiculous logic. One of the second-class disciples demanded to know why he didn't use the chain punch. Jin argued that if he used it, the battle would have gone on forever and they would have both been severely injured. So instead, he focused on the essence of the duel, which was to take his opponent down. Although he was left crying, at least the kid didn't have any lasting injuries. But their seniors refused to give up. Their own pride as Shaolin monks was being trampled on. Honestly, they knew that they were just being difficult. But the fear of Shaolin martial arts being looked down on was too great. At worst, all the new disciples might abandon the path. They all turned to Hai-jung for direction, which is why his smile was so surprising to them. The first disciple called out to Mu-jin. He confirmed that the boy used such a technique in order to win without doing any harm to Mu-gung. With that, he was pleased by the child's obedience to the essence of Shaolin, and accepted him as the victor. No one could believe it. Not even Mu-jin expected this sort of acknowledgement. However, Jung believed that the reason the boy's skills were more effective than the chain punch was because his opponent's current level is too low. So, he decided to demonstrate the essence of Shaolin martial arts himself. Its true power is capable of taking down demonic creatures. He had the second disciples bring him a boulder. All of the children observed with wide eyes. He was going to show them the true power of the chain punch. Hai-jung began with a deep inhale. His eyes widened and he reeled back an energized fist. He crashed into the boulder before breaking straight through it. The young monks were overjoyed by the demonstration. Hai-jung himself was rather pleased by their reactions. Mu-jin's mouth was hanging open. He couldn't hold back. Real martial arts are just way too cool. He thought about stories where one impact is enough to break a mountain, where a single sword swing can take down hundreds of enemies, or when one punch is enough to blow right through an enemy. Wait, that last part made him reconsider things a bit. He raised his hand to the first disciple and sought to confirm his previous explanation that the essence of Shaolin is to overpower the enemy without bringing them harm. Jung was confused, but agreed. Mu-jin uncomfortably pointed out the contradiction of the man breaking the boulder into pieces. Hai-jung stared at the ruined pile of rocks in front of him. Every monk shared a similarly blank stare. Silence ensued. Later, the hallmaster was told the results of the duel. Mu-jin clearly wasn't some ordinary child. Jung admitted that although the boy is arrogant, he's begun training the chain punch harder than any of the other young monks. The hallmaster could tell that Jung was worried that Jin was training it in order to figure out its weaknesses. He feared that the child might be a spy of the Unorthodox Alliance, or even the demonic cult. He was worried that Mu-jin might be a spy. The hallmaster argued that Mu-jin's behavior would be pretty counterproductive for a spy. Hai-jung brought up the possibility of reverse psychology. The hallmaster admitted that whatever the case, the boy is a new disciple. So they'll continue to watch over him and learn more as time goes on. Then he realized something. Maybe the boy actually comes from a martial family. That would certainly explain all his strange techniques. A father's example can be very impactful on their child. So they reasoned that Mu-jin might just want to prove that his father's teachings are superior to theirs. And defeating Mu-gung has only made the child that much more arrogant. The Hallmaster came up with the idea of leaving him in Beopgang's care. Jung was surprised by the prospect, since Beopgang is a member of the discipline court. Apparently, he volunteered to join their hall instead. At night, a group of second disciple monks were headed off to bed after a solid training session. But one of them noticed something awful. He suddenly insisted that they head back another way. The others decided to have a look at what he saw. They were just as shocked as he was. The mad dog and rules fanatic, Beopgang, was in the midst of training. They had to wonder why he was practicing the horse dance here instead of at the training ground. It seems like he decided to continue training without rest. They began laughing about the guy's ridiculous nicknames. One of them joked about the rules dog being a perfect fit for the discipline court. And he stopped laughing when his buddy mentioned that Beopgang would be joining their hall tomorrow. They started freaking out. There were even rumors about him becoming the next master of the discipline court. They dreaded the thought of having to live with the mad dog all over again. Beopgang is an influential second disciple that's always been hard on his juniors when it comes to maintaining the discipline of Shaolin. It turns out that he'll be joining each of the halls and courts to learn the full scope of Shaolin's rules before heading back to the discipline court. Although he's scary, the man is certainly deserving of respect. Beopgang strives to be a role model for others. He doesn't believe it's right to ask others to follow the rules if he is unable to do the same. He spent much more time in basic training than his peers. This, along with a combination of lacking rest, caused his knees to suffer greatly. If he doesn't make constant use of his internal energy, just the act of walking becomes very painful. But he doesn't care. Basic training is both physical and mental. He considers the pain to be a part of training his mind. Eventually, he finished doing squats for more than half an hour straight. He's already been told about Mu Jin, the problem child and promising disciple of Arhat Hall. Beopgang fully intended to reform the boy's mindset to be befitting of a Shaolin disciple. The next day, all of the seniors who hadn't gotten the memo were stressed out by his presence. Mu Jin took note of the new guy, while Mu Yul was just happy that they weren't late. Beopgang happily greeted them all and expressed his enthusiasm towards working with them. Mu Jin assessed the man's physique to be like that of a soldier's. He took a look at the reactions of his seniors, then at the reactions of his peers. With that, he was able to get a good grasp of the situation. Their training began with the horse dance. To provide proper guidance, Beopgang resolved himself to figuring out exactly what the problem is. So, he was keeping a close eye on Mu Jin. And he noticed something. The boy's legs were spread wider than his shoulders, his back was straight, his backside was kept outwards, and his toes are facing forward. The mad dog mirrored his form to gain a better understanding. After each movement, Mu Jin would breathe in and breathe out when he rises. Beopgang didn't notice any real difference. It was still painful, so he assumed it was just a way for the kid to get out of training. But just before he could reprimand him, Mu Jin told him that he was doing it wrong. His posture was totally off. Beopgang didn't understand. Mu Jin realized that he would need to teach a grown man how to properly exercise from the ground up. He wasn't sure why the guy was mimicking him, but he could hear the man's knees pop every time they were bent. As a trainer, this was not something he could ignore, and having the disciplinary master on his side was sure to be beneficial. He planned to make his life a whole lot easier by winning the man over. Jin told him that copying him with a bad knee would do more harm than good. He told his senior to follow his direction. He cheered Beopgang on during his stretching lunge sets. By doing this before any real exercise, he would be able to reduce the pressure on them. Beopgang could already feel the difference. Then Jin explained how sets worked in a roundabout way. Soon, he noticed that the man was still clutching onto his knee, so he took matters into his own hands. Even a light massage was terribly painful. But before long, things began to change. Beopgang began to feel relieved and refreshed. After a bit of that, Mu Jin told him to get ready for his second set. Beopgang was surprised that they were going back at it right away. Mu Jin let him know that training waits for no one. This troublemaking kid wasn't at all like he expected. All the other monks watched them from a distance. Haijung had to wonder if the bad apple was even affecting the mad dog. Beopgang was infamous for relentlessly hounding his fellow disciples from the moment they joined Shaolin, so they all know how obsessive the guy can be. Yet here he is being friendly and training with the weird new monk. Mu-jin continued to educate his diligent senior. He told the man to avoid squatting like he's sitting in a chair for now due to his injured knees. Jin suggested mini squats instead. He needed his fellow monk to pay close attention. After slightly bending his knees, he would need to slowly sit down. But as he sits, he should use strength from his thighs and butt instead of his knees. And the same goes for when he stands back up. Beopgang was surprised by how much better it felt. He was definitely feeling less pain. With the completion of 3 sets, they'll be moving on to training their calves. As a trainer, Mu-jin knows that gym members that look like soldiers tend to have a weakness towards people who are very friendly. So Mu-jin complimented the man for every positive thing he did. The second-class disciples had to wonder if the mad dog had truly gone mad. Hae-jung tried to calm himself down by praying. His headache was so severe that he decided to ignore them for the time being. Soon enough, it was time for breakfast. Now that training was over, Mu-jin told his new friend that he should do exactly as he just taught him when training his lower body. Beopgang agreed. He wasn't blindly following the boy's instruction, but after experiencing it for himself, he decided to continue following the exercise routine. After his session with a top-class personal trainer, something became very clear to him. This boy's techniques are truly incredible. There was nothing bad to be said about any of it. He asked Mu-jin if they were techniques he learned from his family. The boy was confused. Beopgang was sure that Mu-jin's knowledge of such incredible techniques must mean that he hails from an extraordinary family. He was told that these techniques have been passed down through Mu-jin's family for generations. The devious monk relished in their misunderstanding. He wasn't sure how he would bounce back from his unexplained strangeness, so this was great. He confirmed the rumor, and Beopgang was very pleased. However, his praise was limited to the treatment it provided to his knees. Shaolin has been around for a millennia and is the greatest martial arts discipline. He respected the boy's love for his family, but hoped that his training in Shaolin would also improve. Mu-jin heeded his senior's words. Then he left for breakfast with Mu-yul. The other boy had been waiting for him so they could eat together. An infuriated Hae-jung showed up behind the mad dog. Beopgang deeply apologized to him for the way things looked. He explained that he needed to gain a better understanding of the boy to make a proper assessment. Jung didn't like it, but wanted to know the monk's opinion. Beopgang thought about it for a moment. He believes that Mu-jin comes from a family of physicians rather than a family of martial artists. Hae-jung wondered how he came to such a conclusion, which prompted Beopgang to make a confession. He explained the poor state of his knees due to training. Jung wondered why the monk hadn't said anything before now. Beopgang didn't want to worry his elders or show weakness to his juniors. Even the men he's trained with for more than 10 years are unaware of his condition. Yet Mu-jin was able to make an accurate assessment immediately. He admitted that Mu-jin was teaching him exercises that would not strain his knees. Hae-jung couldn't believe he hadn't seen it before, but he still feared that such a talented child might be a danger to Shaolin training. Beopgang told him not to worry since he'll be guiding Mu-jin onto the correct path. Kids tend to listen to adults they're close with. Instead of being forceful, he'd get closer to the boy and slowly teach him the ways of Shaolin. Jung thought about it and agreed that they should try to take things slow, so they'd be counting on him. After breakfast, Mu-jin was frustrated. Having Buddhism lessons right after breakfast was really annoying. Hae-jung announced that since they've all perfected the form of the chain punch, they'd be moving on to their next training. A person can only utilize the full extent of martial arts by harmoniously combining their internal and external energies. It was time for them to master their internal energy. 2 monks would now demonstrate. They both assumed the lotus position. Then they were instructed to close their eyes and focus on their breathing. They would breathe in deeply through the nose, allowing the air to pass through them. This would continue until their energy core is reached. Mu-jin was excited to finally learn the martial arts he has been dreaming of. They were about to learn something truly worthwhile. The other young monks were just as excited. This is the path to being able to break boulders like Hae-jung showed them. So they all followed along diligently. But Mu-jin couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this training. Mu-jin could tell that this was a bit different from the Shaolin training methods he knows from novels. He expected there to be a chant of some sort for inner energy cultivation. Yin and yang, the 5 elements, something. He decided to just follow along and assumed that there must be a good reason. Jin spent an hour doing exactly as he was told. After all, he really wanted access to inner energy, a source of power that lets humans do things like split mountains or even fly. After reading so many novels, this was like a dream come true. All of the young monks were told to open their eyes. Haijung explained that the energy cultivation technique is a basic breathing method that allows a person to feel energy and contain it within their body. They need to be able to feel energy before they can move on to more advanced techniques. They would need to practice this every day, whenever possible, until they can feel energy. Jin deflated. He couldn't believe that they were making them start with basic breathing techniques all over again. Then he was handed a book. Inside it are images of a person's meridians. Haijung explained that they don't need to memorize the entire book. Just the main meridians will suffice. They can be used when circulating energy or when subduing an opponent. This improved Jin's mood. Meridians are the passageway of energy flow within the body. From there, they continued to study the locations of them. Jin decided to memorize the entire thing in a day. Later on, when he was thinking about the lesson, he ran into someone familiar. It was Beabgang in the midst of exercise. Jin shouted at him in disbelief. The mad dog laughed and said that his knees don't hurt as much thanks to the exercises the boy taught him. So now, he's planning on training even more than before. Jin could hear his knees crying out. He angrily told the fool that he was taught those things so his knees can recover. Beabgang retorted that iron only gets stronger the more it struck. Then he flexed his muscles to further illustrate the point. But to Jin, his muscles were just skin and bones since he doesn't eat enough protein. He told his senior that iron only gets stronger when it is struck correctly. Otherwise, it'll just break. That was enough to give Beabgang pause. Jin told him to sit down, and the older monk listened. He was going to relieve some of the pressure on the guy's knees and warned that it was going to hurt a bit. Beabgang winced in pain. Handling such damaged knees reminded Jin of his past. Back when he was in Special Forces, he was badly injured, but decided to power through regardless. Their mission required him to cross a river, and he slipped. In the end, he was forced to retire. For a while after that, he lived each day without energy. Dealing with Beabgang was like looking in a mirror at his old self. He solemnly told the monk that if a person's body is injured, then they're the only one who suffers, that no one else will take responsibility for it. So he begged him to treasure his body. Beabgang called out to his junior, who worried that he might have overstepped. The second-class disciple put a hand on the young monk's head. With a big smile, he promised that Shaolin does not abandon anyone, no matter what. Jin stared at him wordlessly. Then he smiled to himself. He decided to trust his senior's words. Beabgang started saying that Jin should trust him when it comes to training too, but was interrupted by his own outcry of pain. This was the first scream he's let out since joining Shaolin 18 years ago. An embarrassed Beabgang apologized for taking up Jin's time. Jin let him know that he's headed back to his room to practice energy circulation. Beabgang assumed that the boy was already able to feel energy thanks to his family's cultivation technique. It only made sense for a physician to be able to read the flow of energy. Jin nervously claimed that he wasn't able to learn it at home for personal reasons. Beabgang suggested that he practice it where they are, since he was going to be doing the same thing anyways. And if he does it close to Jin, maybe he'll have an easier time sensing it. Jin liked the sound of his idea. He sat down to do just that. He eagerly let his senior know that he's ready to begin. Beabgang told him to pay close attention. He began by pulling in air through his nose. Jin was watching intently. The air around his senior felt different. Then, something began to change. He was able to see something that he hadn't while training alone. He wondered if this was what the older monks were talking about. If this is energy. When breathing through the mouth, a monk is taught to gather all the evil energies within their body and release them. They then draw in pure energy from nature until it arrives at their energy core. Looking at Beabgang, Jin knew that his own breathing technique, posture, and energy absorption were way off. He mimicked what he saw and finally felt the flow of energy. However, he was a little bothered by how tiny it was, but he decided to shift his thinking. If truffle chips with barely any truffle oil can claim to be the real thing, then his progress was a raging success. Beabgang looked at him with wide eyes. He was impressed by how quickly Mu Jin managed to get the hang of it. The elder monks were right. He's convinced that Mu Jin will eventually become a pillar of Shaolin. Mu Jin was figuring out how to sense and store energy. Since he's practiced the breathing technique so much, it's stable and familiar. But as he slowly opened his eyes, he wondered why he was feeling colder. Beabgong stood before him proudly. It is already nighttime. Mu Jin apologized for not noticing sooner. Beabgong didn't mind, but told the young monk to get back to his room before they ring the bell. Mu Jin spoke up once more. He thanked his senior for his instruction. Beabgong was impressed by the boy's level of proficiency, despite this being his first time sensing energy. He told Mu Jin that he'll be able to learn the enlightenment cultivation technique now. Mu Jin thought that he'd need to memorize all the meridians to do so first. But since he's from a physician family, Beabgong assumed that the boy was already familiar. Suddenly, Mu Jin claimed that he was just joking. Beabgong waved it off and told the boy to head back. This whole physician family story was harder to maintain than he expected. Now, he definitely needed to memorize the meridians in a day, which is why he was so tired the next morning. Those who can sense energy and have memorized the meridians were asked to step forward. Mu Jin was proud of his accomplishment, but was surprised to see that he wasn't the only one. He looked at them in confusion. He wondered if sensing energy was easier than he thought, since there were a few others. As the main character, Mu Jin is supposed to be an exceptional genius, so he questioned what was going on. Haijung explained that they'll now be learning the enlightenment cultivation technique. He began teaching them the basics. Some of their peers could not believe how quickly they managed to learn energy sensing and the various meridians. It didn't take long for the boys to return. Mu Yul asked his friend how he learned everything so quickly. Mu Jin told him that since it's just the basics, it wasn't that hard. He began explaining the process, but his airheaded friend wasn't getting it at all. Jin could tell as much, and Yul confirmed it. So Jin decided to keep it simple and told him to just focus on his breathing. Mu Jin continued to reinforce his own memory of the basics along with this new technique. He could feel energy accumulate in his body faster. Although it was still really small, he was already 10 times better. Either way, he was overjoyed to be learning inner energy like the characters from his favorite novels. From there, his training progressed smoothly. Later, he was interrupted by a loud Mu Yul. Mu Jin turned to ask the boy where he's been this whole time and was shocked by what he saw. There was a leg over his shoulder and an arm being dragged through the dirt. Mu Yul showed up with another monk's body. Mu Jin was beyond freaked out. No matter how long he stared, he couldn't figure out what he was seeing. So he decided to ask. Mu Yul told him that the other boy isn't dead. That declaration didn't exactly put Jin at ease though. Apparently, this is Mu Kyung, a boy who joined Shaolin before him. Jin asked why he was carrying and dragging the boy around. Mu Yul responded that he didn't carry him on his back because he was too scared. He needs to get him up, but the kid is totally out of it. Mu Jin got up and decided to get a closer look. He dropped down and inspected. He noticed something. The dirt was clearly caused by Mu Yul. However, the bruises he saw were different. He deduced that someone beat the boy up. Besides all the bruises, there was even a footprint on his gi. Now that he thought about it, Mu Kyung's name sounded familiar. The other monk was tall, scrawny, and appeared to be malnourished. He never paid much attention to the kid, but he just knew that there was something more that he was forgetting. But he decided to shake it off and focus on the situation at hand. Yul wondered why the kid was beaten up. Jin had no clue, but he was pretty sure that he knew someone who would. Since the boy joined Shaolin before Mu Yul, they'd need to ask someone who joined even earlier than that. The same kid he won a spar against, Mu Gung. The older boy wondered what they wanted. They just stared at him. Mu Kyung's unconscious body certainly didn't put him at ease. Before they went to Mu Gung, Yul wondered if the other boy was a suspect. But Jin hardly expected such a crybaby to have the guts to beat someone up like this. Mu Gung was the earliest to join out of all the new monks, so he must know what the place was like before they joined. The stare down continued. Mu Gung was becoming more uncomfortable by the second. The silence was broken when Mu Yul lost his grip and Mu Kyung's body came crashing down. The poor boy's soul almost left him after that. More silence ensued. Mu Gung wondered if the other boy might have just died. Things became more tense when he asked why he should waste his training time talking to them. Jin didn't understand why the kid had such a bad attitude. He's supposed to be Mu-kyung Sr., so Jin asked if training was more important to him than a badly injured junior. Mu-gung was annoyed and pointed out that Jin is supposed to be his junior too. But Jin warned that in that case, Gung would be a senior that was beaten by a junior. Mu-gung insisted that such a thing only happened because he let his guard down. Jin accepted his words with a mocking tone. When he kept going, Mu-gung had enough. He responded with the chain punch. But Mu-jin repelled the attack and rushed in like an unchained beast. He grabbed hold of the boy's gi. The two of them hurtled several paces back. Jin quickly locked the boy in place. He held him in a twister hold while mocking Mu-gung for losing yet again. Jin made it clear that the result will be the same even if they fight 100 times. After all, Gung doesn't know why he keeps losing. Mu-gung's anger surged, but he could not break free. Instead, Mu-jin had a proposition for him. If Mu-gung explains what happened to Mu-kyung, Jin will tell him why he lost. He released the hold, and Mu-gung leapt away as quickly as he could. Now Jin understood that Gung was holding a grudge over his previous defeat. Mu-gung was frustrated, but couldn't hold back his curiosity and wondered if Jin would really tell him. Jin replied that he would only do so once Mu-gung holds up his end of the bargain. So Mu-gung told him that it's because the kid got on the bad side of Mu-tae and his goons. Mu-tae is an outer sect disciple, and the only son of the Seobul escort establishment's owner. Mu-kyung's father works as a porter for the business. While Mu-tae was being recruited to the temple, Mu-kyung's talent was noticed as well, so the two of them were brought together. Mu-tae does not like being upstaged, so he started bullying the kid. Because Mu-kyung's father works for Mu-tae's, he can't even come forward with the truth. The revelation pissed Mu-jin off. He angrily pointed a finger at Mu-gung since he had the most influence out of all of them and he hasn't done a thing. Mu-gung flinched back. He didn't believe there was anything he could do. Mu-jin retorted that Mu-gung is supposed to be the strongest. He should have been protecting the kid. Mu-gung yelled back that there are 3 of them. Fighting one would be hard enough. 3 would be impossible. Again, Mu-jin emphasized the fact that Mu-yul told him that Gung is the strongest. They both turned to the airhead. Embarrassed but unopposed, Mu-gung admitted that it may look that way to Mu-yul because the 3 of them don't take their training seriously. He reiterated the fact that they are outer sect disciples. Essentially, those kids already come from martial arts families that use Shaolin techniques as their base, so they already know the basics and don't have to take their training that seriously. This is why they were able to step up with Mu-jin and move on to the next step. Jin began thinking to himself. Just then, Mu-kyung began waking up. He held his head and wondered where he is. Then he looked up and saw 3 scary expressions aimed in his direction. He fled back in fear while crying out, but they all insisted that they weren't going to hurt him. Jin explained that he heard all about the situation from Mu-gung, but based on the kid's body language, it was even more severe than he realized. Because of his father's job, Mu-kyung's situation was a bit more complicated than just asking an elder for help. Jin wondered if there was no way to help him, but then he had a realization. He offered to lend a hand and asked the boy to hear him out. Mu-kyung was confused, but listened. Jin suggested that they report the bullies to Hai-jung. Mu-kyung was speechless. Then he asked if the kid was just teasing him. But Jin insisted that things would be fine for his father if Mu-kyung becomes a disciple of the main martial group. Outer sect disciples usually stay out of Shaolin, so even if they're connected to a big business like Mu-tae, they can't recklessly mess with a main temple disciple. Mu-kyung and Mu-gung were shocked as they realized what Jin planned to accomplish. Meanwhile, Mu-yul was totally oblivious. Mu-jin was rather pleased with himself. He remembered Beopgang's promise that Shaolin will never abandon any disciple. It was time to put that to the test. Jin extended a hand. He asked the boy if he wanted to give it a try. Mu-jin asked the kid why he wasn't responding. He wondered if it was because the boy lacked the confidence to become a main disciple. Mu-kyung continued shaking and looking away. Jin got a little upset when he asked if the kid was willing to let his dad work under the family of someone who bullies him. The realization disturbed Mu-kyung deeply. He winced. Then he grabbed Mu-jin's hand and agreed to try. Jin praised him for the wise decision. Now he would tell them about the second plan. He wasn't willing to let the bullying continue until Mu-kyung becomes a main disciple. So, they would need to give Mu-tae a beatdown first. We fast forward to 3 days later during afternoon free time. The group of bullies were expecting Mu-kyung's arrival. Mu-tae told him earlier that if he doesn't show up, he'll send a letter to his family. It's only been 2 days since the last time they beat him up, but the bullies were excited since they tend to do this sort of thing daily. But they also noticed that their target has been hanging out with some weirdos lately. Jin and Yul were understandable, but a role model like Mu-gung doing so was strange. Then again, they wouldn't mind having more targets to pick on. Mu-tae was excited. He's been wanting to put a dent in Mu-jin's head for a while now. His goons agreed and wanted to do the same thing to Mu-gung. As a group of monks approached, they continued making fun of Mu-gung for crying at the end of his sparring match. Mu-tae noticed them first. Jin was happy to see that none of them were running away. The bullies couldn't hold back their laughter at the thought of them running away. One of them called Mu-gung a brainless gorilla. Now Mu-gung was more than happy to take them on. The two groups were ready for a fight. Jin told Mu-kyung that Tae would be his opponent. He hoped that the boy would remember everything he taught him. Mu-kyung was nervous, but Jin had faith. It was time for an all-out brawl. Mu-tae called out to his favorite victim. He loomed over the boy and asked if he wanted to hit him. Mu-kyung was shaking in fear. Mu-tae reminded him that doing something like that would be troublesome for his poor father. Tears began to well up in Mu-kyung's eyes. He remembered his kind father. Then he remembered what Jin told him about saving his dad, that he needs to teach the bullies a lesson and become a main disciple. Mu-kyung summoned all his courage. He suddenly threw a punch in defense of his father. Mu-tae barely managed to dodge out of the way. He responded with an empowered fist of his own, aimed at the boy's gut. Elsewhere, a fist was caught in transit. At first, the bully was impressed. Then he was disturbed by the strength of Mu-gung's grip. Fear soon followed after that. At the moment, Mu-gung was giving off a totally different vibe. We flash back to Jin trying to recruit the kid. He ignored the protests and decided to hold up his end of the bargain. He was going to tell Mu-gung why he can't beat him in a fight. Although the chain punch is really fast and strong, that's all there is to it. The best way to teach him would be through experience. He warned the boy that he was going to attack with the chain punch's first technique. All Mu-gung needed to do was try avoiding it. Mu-gung quickly assumed a defensive stance. He avoided the fist and was praised. Then Jin told him that he would be using the second technique this time. Jin reeled back and Mu-gung anticipated his next move. But then he was hit by a low kick instead. Mu-gung flailed in pain while complaining about the deception. That was exactly Jin's point. If an opponent already knows what to expect, why would they allow themselves to be hit on purpose? Mu-gung needs to deceive his opponents for his powerful attacks to land. Although he's really strong, Jin can predict what he'll do based on his posture. Mu-gung argued that he just needs to be so fast that it doesn't matter if an opponent sees it coming. Jin recognized that as a fair point, but that's something Mu-gung can only cling to once he is the strongest in the world. Jin remembered the main character from the author's previous novel. That guy was the strongest in the unorthodox faction and the entire world. His blade techniques could not be dodged even if you can see them coming. Unless he's the strongest in the world, that is not something Mu-gung should depend on. Mu-jin insisted that it's a matter of psychological warfare. In the present, Mu-gung showed his opponent a wicked smile. The bully was wincing in pain. Mu-gung told him that he'd be attacking with the chain punch's first technique. It was up to the goon to dodge it. Mu-gung thought about Jin's lesson for a while. He never considered deception before since he believed it was cowardly. But now, he was having second thoughts about that. He accepted Jin's advice and decided to return the favor with some of his own. He told Jin not to underestimate his opponents just because of their sparring match. Jin wondered what the kid was talking about. Mu-gung is supposed to be the strongest, but Jin already beat him. Mu-gung told him that he wasn't fighting at full strength. If it was a real fight, he would have used the martial arts from his family, along with the inner energy he's managed to gather. Mu-gung brought them elsewhere. He didn't want to upset the elders by demonstrating his family's techniques. Mu-gung already knew that the other boy would be surprised. Once the coast was clear, he started to focus. He began using his inner energy. Then his eyes opened wide. He punched forward, creating ripples of air. Jin could see the energy surrounding his fist. This totally had his attention. Somehow, this was different from when Mu-gung used the chain punch. The speed and power were on par with that of a high school boxer. Although it's not as strong as he imagined, for his age, Mu-gung was pretty much a monster. Every kick or punch was strong enough to make the air snap. Now he understood the danger. Mu-tae's group would all be using their own martial arts to fight. Mu-gung's last punch was close to Jin. He was impressed by the boy's full power. Now he understands why Mu-gung is considered the strongest young monk. But then again, he can tell that Mu-gung can't freely control his inner energy, so he's not too worried about the bullies. Since Jin wasn't making the first move, his opponent decided to take the initiative. The bully charged at him with a prepared fist. After seeing it a few times now, Mu-jin can tell that there's a certain form and posture they use to tap into inner energy. And this was nothing compared to Mu-gung's. He dodged the attack with a smile on his face. This was just way too predictable. His opponent couldn't believe it. He leapt back when he realized that maybe Jin's victory over Mu-gung wasn't a fluke after all. But now it was Jin's turn to engage. He used the iconic Dempsey roll as he closed the distance. The bully guarded up high. Jin saw through it though and didn't mind at all. He just went for a gut punch instead. The bully cried out. He went for an overhead strike, but Jin just dropped down and delivered a mean kick. The jerk fell over. He looked up in fear. Jin stood over him with a scary expression. He broke the pavement. The blow was just shy of his opponent's face. The fearful boy began to cry. He was crying like a baby. Jin was frustrated. Now the bully was making him look like the bad guy. But during his fight, he completely forgot about the others. Mu-gung didn't have any trouble winning his fight, so Jin turned his attention to Mu-kyung's battle. But what he heard made his blood run cold. Mu-kyung was absolutely brutalizing Mu-tae. He begged the boy to stop since he clearly won a long time ago. He shouted his name, then he was hit by a wave of realization. Now he remembered where he knew the boy's name from. Mu-kyung, the one who makes a mess out of his opponent's faces. The one who stains both hands with blood. The one with eyes full of madness. Fear began to overtake Mu-jin. He remembered a character from the author's first novel, Return of the Demon Supreme. The most insane character of them all was a villain that loves blood more than anyone. Mu-kyung, the Blood Monk. Jin forgot all about it when he got older, but there was a picture of a certain character inside the book he loved. The character always said that all humans are evil. He would use blood to wash away their cycle of sins. And Jin could see that same madness and horror rising before his very eyes. He may have woken up a monster. Mu-jin began shaking. At this rate, Mu-kyung was going to kill Mu-tae. He called out for Mu-yul to help, and the two sprung into action. They tried to restrain him as he went berserk. Eventually, the monk dropped to his knees. Jin struggled to understand the boy's strength. Mu-kyung began crying, and soon, he too was crying like a baby. Mu-jin was relieved to see that the kid hasn't become the Blood Monk just yet. In the novel, he was a psycho from his very first appearance. It was never explained how he became the way he was. Maybe he crossed a line he shouldn't have after all the constant bullying. Suddenly, Beabgang shouted at them all from behind. This was not good. The mad dog was furious and demanded an explanation. He wanted Mu-jin to tell him everything that happened. He was also shocked to see that even Mu-gung was involved. Jin frowned deeply. He thought to himself while their senior continued to shout. He went over to Mu-kyung and grabbed his gi. Beabgang was totally confused. Then his eyes went wide. Jin told the second-class monk to look at the boy's body. The marks of abuse were all over him. Beabgang began to see the situation differently and asked for an explanation yet again. Jin explained that Mu-tae and his goons had been bullying Mu-kyung for 2 months straight. They planned on doing it again today, so Jin decided to help him. For a moment, Beabgang was dead calm. Then he directed his fury towards the bullies. He told them to raise their heads. Then he demanded to know if Jin's words were true. More second-class monks entered the fray after hearing his shouting. They were totally dumbfounded by what they saw. Beabgang decided to ask Mukyung directly. The boy struggled to respond, but Jin placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and told him that he just needs to tell the truth. Beabgang was fair and just, so there was no reason to be afraid anymore. Tears began to fall from his eyes. Overwhelmed by emotions, he confirmed everything Jin said. He couldn't control his tears, and slowly told them everything he went through since joining Shaolin. The older monks were deeply disturbed by what they heard. Jin reminded his senior what he said about Shaolin never abandoning its disciples. Because Mukyung is a disciple of Shaolin, Jin felt the need to protect him. Beabgang argued that the other children are also disciples of Shaolin. Jin asked him if guys like them who threatened the lives of a father and son were truly disciples of Shaolin. He questioned if this is what the temple really stands for. They stared each other down, but were interrupted by a familiar voice. The Hallmaster confirmed Jin's words. So long as he and Mukyung are telling the truth, they would launch a full-scale investigation. If true, the bullies will no longer be disciples of Shaolin Temple. Jin just hoped that the investigation would be fair and just. But the Hallmaster raised a hand. Even if they're no longer disciples, what happened today cannot be overlooked. Shaolin martial arts is meant to subdue opponents. Instead, these children were brutalized. Mukyung swiftly began begging for forgiveness, but was interrupted by Mu Jin. Jin took full responsibility and told them that he was the one who did that to Mu Tae. Mukyung was in shock. Jin feared that the blood monk might awaken otherwise. If he can protect him, Mukyung might become the best comrade possible. Mu Jin was taken to a place in the forest where monks meditate while facing a wall in order to attain enlightenment. He would remain in the cave as his punishment. He can't talk to anyone or even look out of the cave, even when sleeping or eating. And he will occasionally be given rice balls and water. Jin mulled over the fact that this world features elements from every novel written by the author. Both of the previous books share the same world, and both protagonists are in different areas during the same time period. Because of this, his actions may influence the events of the other novels. He fears that he may have caused a butterfly effect and impacted the other protagonists. To get stronger, he'll need to find the right places and connections while avoiding anything that would compromise the others. But it's been so long since he read those stories, so his memory is a bit vague. If he's not careful, he could end up ruining everything. He may have already messed up by taking in Mukyung. The main character of the second book was supposed to gain enlightenment and get stronger by fighting the Blood Monk. But now, his greatest opponent will be missing. This was all really complicated, and Jin did not know where to begin. A lone figure appeared at the mouth of the cave. It was Beabgang. It looked like Mu Jin was totally focused on repentance. He was impressed by the 12-year-old's concentration and repentant mindset. This only reaffirmed his belief that Mu Jin will become a pillar of Shaolin. Some time ago, Haijung and the Hallmaster lamented their failure to see what was happening sooner. But then they shifted the conversation to the investigation. They confirmed the truth by questioning all of the young monks. This brought a great shame to their hall. Beabgang joined them. He sought to confirm that the Hallmaster noticed the same thing he had. Based on his hands and face, it was obvious that Mukyung was the one who brutalized Mu Tae, not Jin. They thought about the fact that they received both a blessing and a disaster at the same time. Then again, maybe the blessing saved them from the disaster. Silence ensued for a while. Beabgang had something to say. He believes that this entire situation is everyone's fault. Instead of casting blame, they should focus on making sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again. The Hallmaster awaited his suggestion. Beabgang expressed that the incident was mainly caused by the lack of training. The bullies had too much stamina to spare at the end of the day. So he proposed that they ramp up the training to really tire the monks out. The Hallmaster thought about it. He then decided to leave the matter in their hands since he still needs to wrap everything up. But now that they have the truth, he would be going to the discipline court. In the present, Beabgang smiled at what he saw. Even after 2 hours, Mu Jin hasn't moved in the slightest. He decided that there was no need to monitor him further. He used a movement art to swiftly return. He'd come back early tomorrow morning. Jin looked over his shoulder with a smile once the man was gone. Thanks to his special forces training, he can tell when the man is nearby. He fell on his back and wondered what he should do for the next 7 days. He doesn't even have beans or mushrooms to give him protein for exercising. Then his mind drifted to the last time he ate some meat. It was the fried chicken he had before coming to this world. He was really hungry, and now he really wanted some meat. Jin wondered where he might be able to get it from. Then he shot up. He can just hunt for it. Later, a girl was running at the same time as a rabbit. The rabbit raced ahead of her and was snared by a trap. The girl dropped down to observe. Jin raced towards his precious protein. He was already drooling as he approached. The girl watched him curiously. Then we shift to the opposite side of Shaolin Temple. Many disciples were spread out through the prefecture. They asked several people questions. Then they gathered at the entrance of the Seobul escort establishment. Aijung introduced himself as he entered. He was greeted by the owner. The man considered it an honor to meet the invincible fist. But his expression quickly fell. His son was in a terrible state and trembling. The owner demanded to know what happened to his boy. The monks maintained their stony expressions. Aijung took a breath before responding. Then he exclaimed that the man's son is trembling due to his own sin. Instead of training to be pure, he bullied a fellow monk and threw Shaolin Temple into disarray. Byung grew pale as his son shook within his grasp. During their interview, the monks also discovered that the escort establishment has also been coercing money out of the locals. The thought of an outer sect committing such evil was overwhelming. Haijun commanded his monks to attack and make their opponents incapable of ever using martial arts again. Byung staggered and told his men to stop them. The two sides clashed. The temple monks swiftly proved their superiority. Inner energy was channeled, then slammed into one of the goons. The same thing happened to each and every one of them. The monks would be returning everything they unjustly took from the people. All of the non-combatant workers wondered what they were going to do from now on. Haijung asked for one man in particular. He meekly identified himself and wondered if something was wrong. The man grew pale when he looked ahead. Haijung bowed his head and apologized. The child that Mute bullied was this man's son. Mukyung's father was disturbed. Haijung apologized for failing to stop it from happening. He promised that the Shaolin Temple will take full responsibility for it. Afterwards, the monks helped Mukyung's father find work as a porter for a stable and righteous establishment. Elsewhere, Jin was glaring down at something. He was looking at some sort of sloppy trap. It was an inferior copy of his rabbit trap from yesterday. Now he had to wonder if someone else may be on the mountain. Then he heard something nearby. He approached, much to the girl's shock. She immediately fled. He called after her, but she kept running. She looked over her shoulder and wondered if the boy was gone. Jin suddenly blindsided her. He reached out just as quickly. She screamed. Now Jin was able to get a better look at her. The girl was crying and began apologizing. Jin eased up. Then he asked if she wants some food. Soon, they were eating together. He could tell that she was enjoying it. Jin asked if she was trying to trap a rabbit of her own since she was hungry. The girl confirmed his suspicions. But she questioned if it's alright for a monk to be eating meat. A nervous Jin told her that he has his own circumstances she doesn't need to worry about. Then Jin asked what she's doing so deep in the mountains. This place is owned by Shaolin Temple, but her attire is clearly different. The girl hesitated. She remembered begging her father not to leave her. She asked if she's hated for being useless, or if she wasn't supposed to be born at all. Assuming she has her own difficult circumstances, Jin decided not to press the matter. He changed the topic by asking her to keep his rabbit hunting a secret. She asked if it's because he can't be caught eating meat. Jin staggered and admitted that it's one of a few reasons. In exchange, he'll help her get home. Soon, a shirtless monk will be returning to this location, and he knows for sure that the man will help her. Jin added that he can sense the man's presence. Later, Beabgang returned to the cave, and that's when the girl caught his attention. He was shocked to see an outsider in such a place. She told him that she was separated from her group. The shirtless monk promised to bring her home. Then he thought of something. He asked her if she saw a boy in the cave ahead of them. Inside, Jin got the chills. The girl looked up at him. Now she understood why Jin asked her to keep their meeting a secret. The girl claimed that she was too scared to approach the cave. Hearing that, Beabgang was pleased and saw no problem with leaving. He told the girl to follow him. Then he asked for her name. She introduced herself as Liu Seowa. She vowed to repay Mu Jin the next time they meet. Inside the cave, Jin was relieved when they left. He fell back from fatigue and realized that he never asked what her name was. Sighing, he accepted that it's none of his business anyways. He doubts they'll ever meet again. Back at the temple, Beabgang approached Mu Kyung. He had something to tell the boy about his father. Beabgang told him everything that happened in the outside world. Now the boy can totally focus on being a true disciple of Shaolin Temple. Mu Kyung began to shake. Fighting back a stream of tears, he vowed to do his absolute best. Beabgang patted the boy on the head. It is now the 4th day of Mu Jin's punishment. He realized that back when he cooked meat for the girl, he failed to consider the risk of discovery caused by the open flame. To avoid being caught, he decided to start cooking in nearby caves. Using his special forces training, he would be leaving as few traces as possible. Now he's been covering the meat in mud and cooking it that way so he doesn't have to worry about the mess. It isn't perfect, but at least he can get his protein in this way. On the 5th day, he reflected on the fact that he's been getting up and entering the lotus position before the bell is struck at Shaolin Temple. That way, he can look good whenever Beabgang checks in on him. Again, the older monk was impressed by the boy's dedication. He wondered if the boy may have been doing so overnight too. He left a bit of food and water. To him, Jin is truly incredible. Jin remained still. He couldn't believe that they were only giving him a few grain balls and water each day. Thankfully, he's been able to make up for his lack of energy through hunting. On the 6th day, he did as much exercise as he could. Thanks to this, he realized something. The breathing method used during exercise is similar to the energy circulation technique. So he challenged himself by combining the two to create his own kind of training. Now his body feels more refreshed than before. Although he does think it's a pity he doesn't have much solitary time left. Jin didn't know this at the time, but this method of his is actually the training process of the energy accumulation art. On the 7th day, Beabgang visited him and told the boy that he can get up now. Jin asked if he can speak, and Beabgang agreed. Now they headed back to the temple for early morning training. As they walked, Jin questioned how the incident was handled. Beabgang filled him in on everything that happened. He also added that the intensity of their training has increased. From now on, he'll also need Jin to follow the training of Shaolin Temple rather than just doing his own thing. Jin was a bit annoyed by the thought. He suggested that he just do even harder training on his own, but Beabgang wanted to see him try it out first. Jin's group was mostly ecstatic to see him back. Jin wondered how they've been. Mu Yul told him that the training has been very tiring lately. Mu Kyung admitted that he nearly gave up, while Mu Gung claimed to be beyond this level of training. Soon, they all heard a shout. It was Hai Jung telling them all to get into position. Items were pulled out of bags and handed to each monk. They were sand pouches to be placed on their bodies. Jin realized that this is why the training has been harder. All of the monks were instructed to enter the horse dance. Their struggle was clear to see, but Jin was clearly enjoying the addition of free weights. He's not exactly a big fan of the grip and sense of balance that they provide, but with his bodybuilding experience in mind, this is perfect. He seemed to enjoy himself a little too much. Beabgang approached. His fellow second-class disciples wondered if the mad dog was finally going to reprimand the boy. Beabgang was furious to see Jin fooling around and taking it easy despite his warning. But his thoughts changed upon closer inspection. Jin was clearly sweating more than everyone around him, so maybe his training is even tougher than theirs. But what was even more alarming was the heavy and sharp energy he was picking up on. This was definitely the energy accumulation art. The energy accumulation art is a circulation technique that can only be used once someone has accumulated energy in their body and has gotten used to it. It's the first step into superhuman capabilities. With it, a person can break boulders like Hai Jung had. They may even be able to fly or move at extreme speeds. But this is something that can only be achieved after some manner of epiphany triggered by trial and error. Or at least, that's how it's supposed to work. Mu Jin was having a blast. He enjoyed the strain on his triceps. The other boys felt like they were in hell. But Mu Jin continued doing modern exercises with the sand pouches. This was true bliss for a gym rat like him. To everyone else, he just looked like a madman. Beogang saw the boy in a new light. He marveled at the child's energy. Then he interrupted the kid. He told Jin to follow him. The boy was shown to Haijung. The older monk could recognize the accumulation art too. Jin assumed that this was the result of his wall training. But he couldn't really tell them much since he wasn't supposed to be doing anything besides repenting. So instead, he told them that he was just trying things out. He made some stuff up about his family's breathing techniques and his excitement about being back. Since his family's breathing techniques are similar to energy circulation, he decided to combine the two. The monks were stunned. This should only be possible after the enlightenment cultivation technique has been mastered, and that should take a few years to accomplish. Usually, once the foundation has been laid with the cultivation technique, monks will learn the next level of it. It's more effective to focus on the next level to circulate energy for 2 hours, compared to using the accumulation art after mastering the cultivation technique. But if someone can accomplish it in a few days like Mu Jin has, they'll be able to accumulate energy far faster than their peers. If they learn the next level on top of that, their prowess will receive an exponential boost. Haijung was delighted by the prospect. Maybe Jin can learn the next level quickly too. The old monk cleared his throat. He was just as overjoyed as Beogang. He asked if the child can do this normally. Jin played innocent while claiming that he can only do it when he uses his family's exercising methods. The monks lost their enthusiasm quickly. From there, they let Jin return to his exercise. They hid their disappointment with stony expressions. Once they were done, Jin caught up with his friends. It turns out that they've all continued stretching even in Jin's absence. Mu Yul was the one who taught them how to do it. Mu Kyung admitted that despite a bit of pain, it helps him feel much better afterwards. Jin knows that he taught Mu Yul a lot of stretching exercises. The fact that he could keep up and even teach others is very impressive. He didn't give the kid much thought before since he wasn't mentioned in the novel, but Mu Yul is surprisingly good with his body. Maybe his stupidity held him back from properly utilizing his talents. Jin decided to look into it a bit later. Then he turned his attention to Mu Gung. He wanted to know why Gung wasn't doing it too. Mu Yul told him that they did it together before since the guy's body was really stiff. But Mu Gung begged him to stop talking. Jin kept the pressure on though. Embarrassed, Mu Gung admitted to being really stiff. Jin sighed. There's nothing wrong with having a stiff body. In fact, that's what stretching is intended to deal with. Jin wasn't going to make fun of him for something like that. And he's certainly not the type of guy to make fun of someone who is working hard. Mu Gung paused. He reflected on his past. Everyone admired his build and the fact that he hails from a martial arts family. They always envied him without ever acknowledging his hard work. So Jin's words actually mean a lot to him. He expressed his satisfaction. Hearing that, Jin grabbed his shoulder. Then he decided to help him work even harder with a hamstring stretch. After that, they all started stretching together. Mu Yul appeared to be excelling. Jin yelled at the others like a drill sergeant. Mu Gung took note of Yul. He remembered that the kid is always with Mu Jin. While the other kid was gone, Mu Yul showed them his crazy flexibility that even Jin was impressed by. Mu Jin surpassed him, Mu Yul is a bit dumb but very talented, and Mu Kyung easily beat Mu Tae. Mu Gung can tell that he's surrounded by monsters, and that has only fired him up to work even harder. Thanks to the addition of sand pouches, exercising became a lot more enjoyable for Mu Jin, and in his free time, he did energy accumulation training. He gained more energy and became even stronger, and in between training, he stretches with the others. Some of the older monks noticed something different about Mu Jin. His shoulders were becoming wider. They assumed it was because of his special training. Another 10 days passed. At this point, most of the young monks have learned the enlightenment cultivation technique. Now they'll be moving on to inner energy cultivation. Haijung called 2 monks to demonstrate. First, there's the core punch. Haijung explained the intended distribution of energy. Jin followed along. He assumed the stance, and something happened. His punch broke the air. The feeling was incredible. After doing it, he understood that the distribution was for the sake of his body maintaining balance. He started thinking about putting energy into his legs. And according to Haijung, that's a necessary component to using the first move of the chain punch. Now, Jin needed to consider controlling energy throughout his entire body. This was way more complicated than he expected. He wondered how much training he'd need to be able to do so in the midst of a real fight. But over his shoulder, another boy was having an even harder time. Mu Yul was totally off the mark. Jin came over to correct him. Mu Yul already forgot what they were just taught. Jin wanted to know what the kid actually remembers. And everything he remembered was incorrect, much to Jin's horror. This is clearly why Mu Yul did not appear in the novel. Jin decided to take the boy's instruction into his own hands. After some time, Yul seemed to be getting the hang of it. Jin told the kid to ask him for help if he ever gets confused again, which was immediately, since Yul has no idea what to do with the energy once it's been gathered. Since Jin just explained that, he concluded that Mu Yul is as smart as a goldfish. From then on, the young monks were taught one new step of the chain punch each day. Since this is still foundational martial arts, they were taught everything over the course of 10 days. After that, monks were taught separately based on their progress. After 71 days, Mu Jin and his group all managed to learn the 10 moves of the chain punch. After working on some weighted planks, Jin moved on to doing some squats. Beabgang was overseeing their training, and yet again, he was stunned by Jin. The kid was using a bunch of sand pouches. His strength, stamina, and the size of his body surpassed even the monks who joined before him. To see such improvement in only 2 months, Beabgang had to wonder if the boy was right all along. After training, he thought about everything Jin ever said to him. His thoughts were interrupted by the hallmaster. He could tell that the man was worried about something and asked him to share. Beabgang confessed that it's related to Mu Jin. Later, Jin was sure that he heard the guy wrong, but Beabgang let him know that the hallmaster is looking for him. From behind, Jin's friends were all talking trash about him being in trouble yet again. Beabgang ignored them and told Jin to follow along. Jin really wondered if he did something wrong enough to incur the hallmaster's ire. Jin was now face to face with the hallmaster, and for a few minutes, the man just stared at him without saying a word. Jin could feel the guy glaring at different parts of his body. That made him feel a bit embarrassed, so he decided to flex a bit. The hallmaster asked him what the hell he was doing. Jin didn't have a great answer for that. The old man laughed and mentioned how it's been a while since they've met like this. He admitted that he wanted to confirm something with his own eyes, and now he knows for sure. He can see the energy surrounding Jin's body, and Jin's body has grown much faster than that of his peers. The hallmaster had to ask if it's truly due to his family's training methods. Hearing that, Jin felt like he knew where this was going. He asked the man if he was trying to compare it to the ways of Shaolin, but the hallmaster corrected him, saying that Shaolin is not so close-minded. In fact, he has a proposal. But Jin's memory depicted the open-mindedness of Shaolin in a very different light. The hallmaster explained that Shaolin has lasted as long as it has because they've taken steps to fix their weaknesses and absorb what's good for them. So if Jin can prove the worth of his family's methods, the hallmaster will be willing to accept them. Jin could hardly believe his ears. Because their hall is in charge of training young monks, this is a really big deal. If things go wrong, the hallmaster himself would be punished by the discipline court. Yet he was still willing to make such a big gamble to make Shaolin Temple even stronger. The old man smiled at him, but Jin asked why in the world he would want to do something like that. The hallmaster was hit with a pang of rejection. He was totally bewildered by the question. Jin mentioned the fact that there are 70 new monks, and he has his own training to deal with. Most of the other monks treat him like he's insane, so he doubts they'll listen to a word he says. He couldn't really see much benefit for himself or the conclusion of the novel, and he especially doesn't want to waste his efforts on jerks. But if the hallmaster insists, Jin has one condition. Later, all of the young monks were deep in sleep. Jin took a deep breath. Then, he shouted for them all to wake up. The monks clamored out for training despite not hearing the bell. Jin kept shouting as they ran. When they all arrived, they had no idea what was going on. Haijung explained that they've all been woken up earlier because of some additional warm-ups. On top of that, Mu Jin will be overlooking their daily dawn training from now on. As expected, the reception wasn't great. Jin took in another deep breath and refused to let them underestimate him anymore. He commanded them all to be silent. He shouted that he'll be teaching them all the ways of his family, that during training, he's not to be seen as a new monk like them. Instead, they will all call him instructor. Haijung thought to himself that Jin doesn't even have that much energy in his body yet, but he's still impressed by the look in the boy's eyes. Mugung noticed that some kids were still mocking Jin. Jin noticed too. He scowled and challenged them to keep laughing after the hellish training he puts them through. He told everyone that has a problem with him being the instructor, including the ones laughing, to step forward. If they can take him down, he will give up on teaching. 4 boys surrounded him. Jin told them to attack him all at once. They did, and ended up punching each other in the face. They wondered where he went, but Jin was just squatting down. He made a move and showed up right behind one of them. He began choking him from behind. Jin sent 2 of them flying with the chain punch. Then he hit another boy with a barrage of fists. After that, they were all laid out flat. Then he asked if anyone else wanted to try stepping out of line. The other boys averted their gaze and didn't say a word. So from now on, Mu Jin will be their instructor and expects to be addressed as such. He had them all do push-ups. If a monk's stomach touches the ground, they'll be given even more sand pouches. Jin was channeling his military training and things were going well. But since he couldn't manage 70 monks himself, he made his friends help out. They were able to educate and control their peers, and Mu Kyung's confidence was growing by helping others. Beabgang is a bit like a soldier himself, so he was able to learn things that are perfectly suited for him too. Even the monks who used to fool around have been tamed. The effects of Mu Jin's training quickly appeared. A universal improvement in stamina and physique were obvious. At first, the older monks weren't sure about Jin's instructor mode, but after seeing the results, they began to trust him and even prepared things he requested. Jin's eyes shone when he saw what they brought him: a power rack and a bench press set. Although some of it is made out of wood, Jin knows he'll be able to put it to good use. Even with his friends helping out, there's a limit to how much they can teach so many monks, and Jin didn't have much time for his own training. But these weights would change everything. He will definitely be able to make them all even stronger. 4 months passed. Through consistent training, Mu Jin improved by a multitude of levels. At just 13, he could lift more than 200 pounds and was getting stronger very quickly. He just finished his 12th set. The total weight he lifted across 3 exercises was more than 500 pounds. Jin was very satisfied. The seasons went by just like that. In the spring, 20 young monks left the temple. They failed to learn martial arts within a year, but the older monks were excited, since that's less than 1/3 of the monks that left last time. And there's no doubt that it's all thanks to Mu Jin. At this point, the Hall Master is one of his biggest supporters. He plans to get even more equipment for the hall, but commissioning such things is quite expensive. It's almost time for the official admission test. It's the last test for new monks that's used to choose the disciples that will directly be under Shaolin Temple. If Jin's methods are proven useful with the test, funding won't be an issue at all. In a year, Jin grew about 6 inches taller. Now he can do a total of more than 880 pounds across 3 exercises with 12 sets. He could probably take this even further, but Jin is not a physical trainer. He is a martial artist. If he grows his muscles too much, they could get in the way of certain martial arts movements. So he only grew his muscles to the ideal size. While Jin trained, the Hall Master visited the abbot to talk about the upcoming admission test. The Hall Master promised that the result of the test will be unlike any other. The abbot was looking forward to it. 5 days later, all the high-ranking monks from various places gathered in the hall. Thanks to Mu Jin, 49 new monks made it to the test. And because of that, more monks than usual were here to witness the impressive results of their new training. But some had doubts about so many young monks still remaining. To onlookers, Jin and the others already looked like second-class disciples. Soon, the Hall Master welcomed the honored visitors. Without further delay, they would begin the tests. Jin told Mu Gung and Mu Kyung not to be nervous at the last minute. As for Mu Yul, there was no point in worrying about him. They all step forward together. It's time to have some fun.